An effective teaching learning process happens to have a harmony of well thought out instructional approach, instructional methods, and use of variety of instructional techniques. Teaching method is synonymous to procedure employed to accomplish the lesson objective set. According to Salandanan, in choosing the instructional method, there are factors to consider, such as the learner, subject matter, objectives, time allotment, teacher, and school equipment or facilities. Instructional method is always anchored at the instructional approach. Through the instructional method, the instructional approach is manifested. Instructional approach refers to a set of correlative assumptions or viewpoints dealing with nature of teaching and learning, as Salandanan said. There are two types of instructional approaches that a teacher must consider. First, expository or direct instructional approach. It is a teacher-centered approach in which the teacher delivers academic content in a highly structured format, directing the activities of students and maintaining a focus on academic achievement. This instructional approach can best be defined when instructional objective sets are comprehensible to the students and even among other learners. If there is controlled time for various instructional activities, there is sequencing of the lesson activities under teacher's control, when students' performance is carefully monitored, and when students are oriented academically of their feedback. Expository or direct instructional approach is in fact observed in deductive method, direct instructional or showing method, demonstration method, and lecture method. Other than the expository or direct instructional approach, there is also the indirect or exploratory instructional approach that is known as student-centered instructional approach. Here, it involves building of independent learning and developing self-concepts and develops students to become self-centered learners, critical thinkers, and problem solvers. Indirect or exploratory instructional approach is identified as learner-centered, where learners exercise initiative in the process of learning. It sees process of learning as important as the outcome, and the stress is focused on learning as applied, as it is acquired to develop specific intellectual skills rather than merely covering specified elements of subject matter. The said instructional approach is apparently recognized in inductive method, project method, laboratory method, and most especially in problem-solving method. Thus, this instructional approach speaks of curriculum reforms in the K-12 program. The indirect or exploratory instructional approach best adheres to develop locally and globally competitive learners as well as teachers by developing to them the 21st century skills. Moreover, in social studies education, the problem-based learning curriculum design is considered as one with the vision of developing students' skills in order to live in a knowledge-based environment. The teaching learning process nowadays demands more than just rote learning. Students must be considered as partners in solving problems. Thus, inductive and problem-based solving methods of problem-based learning design remain persistent to develop not just the fundamental skills of reading, writing, and math, but the skills such as teamwork, research gathering, time management, information synthesizing, utilizing high-tech tools, and problem solving. The problem-based learning curriculum design is considered as appropriate for social studies education, for this is developed upon the interests, abilities, purposes and needs of the learners, as Bowson said. Greater part of the new social studies is the introduction of the problem-based learning. Problem-based learning of social studies is observed in the inductive and problem-solving methods, which are known to use student-centered pedagogies so that learners experience learning through problem solving. Anchored in the problem-based learning curriculum design, the exploratory instructional approach through inductive and problem-solving instructional methods, the goals of social studies education can best be achieved. These knowledge, skills, values and attitude, and social participation, as Agno said. Inductive method speaks to the procedure through which one arrives at a fact, principle, rule or generalization from some specific cases, while problem-solving method is composed of a purposeful activity that aim of removing a difficulty or perplexity through a process of reasoning. These instructional methods entail the analysis of facts that involves the presentation of examples to infer common elements. These include curriculum goals that greatly value self-centered learning to develop learners as critical thinkers and problem solvers. There are a number of ready-made instructional materials that shows the techniques and activities associated to analytical and divergent thinking in social studies education. Upon searching for relevant materials, the researcher found his uploaded YouTube video entitled An Approach to Critical History Education, significant in the development of analytical and divergent thinking in social studies. The previous study underscores the value of developing higher order thinking skills among students in history education. The previous study shows that curriculum model was considered to have greater significance in the development of an instructional method that works to develop an analytical and divergent thinking in social studies. This requires quality instruction in order to respond to the development of middle and high-level manpower through conducts of research and extension programs that will continuously develop high level of profession, as Bowson said. Problem-based learning can best be described very broadly as learning that is centered on a problem, a query, or a puzzle that the learner wishes to solve. The term problem-based learning is usually used to describe a curriculum approach which is problem-centered rather than discipline. Further, the researcher found the previous study relevant as it underscored Taba's philosophy that pointed out the role of teacher in developing and designing student objective-based learning activities to develop participative learning among students who are treated as active agents in critical history development, as Frankel said. Though the previous study centers on the development of a learner-centered, relevant, responsive, research-based, and on integrated social studies curriculum for tertiary level, the researcher found this significant as it can be adopted in the secondary grade levels, most particularly in developing analytical and divergent thinking in Araling Panlipunan. In the said study, 2 sample topic lessons were included. Lesson 1, The Setting and the Early Filipinos, where students were tasked to do local history research in order to come up with a historic brochure, while in Lesson 2, Ancient Filipino Customs and Practices, students were grouped for a collaborative work for a group PowerPoint presentation. Evidently, great part of the facilitation of these scheduled lessons was the use of group dynamics. The lesson exemplars were consisted of 4 parts. First part was the learning objectives that reflected the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor domains of learning. The second part was the content that included the basic understanding and the materials to be used. Third was the procedure that included introduction, development of the lesson, closure, and evaluation. And lastly, the additional activities that left courseworks for the students to accomplish, especially for those slow learners, and also included enrichment activities for the fast learners. Result of the study shows that the problem-based learning approach was more appropriate to use compared with traditional approach using lecture method in developing critical social studies. Apparently, the classes of A, B, C performed better in the class as shown in the result of test analyses. Further, the study evidently shows the greater value of developing learned people geared up as critical thinkers and problem solvers. Part of the overall analysis of the previous study revealed that understanding the preliminary topics such as basic geography, history, and culture prepared the learners of critical understanding of social studies. This is on adherence to the spiral progressive curriculum of the K-12 program. The critical thinking assessment was established in the previous study with basis on the instructional strategies model of Hilda Taba that developed greater appreciation of history education through interactive social studies. However, the said study shows the use of traditional and alternative modes of assessment using the multiple choice, true or false, and essay types of tests as tools for critical thinking assessment to evaluate quantitatively the depth of understanding. The tests of multiple choice and true or false were administered after the first week the proposed curriculum plan was implemented, while the essay test consisted of 3 questions was administered on the 3rd week of the implementation. It also presents a number of devices or instruments that were used to measure students' achievement. Learning performance-based, both project and process-oriented outputs of the students were evaluated using analytical rubrics. Nevertheless, social studies in its real sense is all about the teachers and students who look for interesting and thought-provoking sources of topics that will stretch critical thinking and will allow them to develop interpretations, rationales, and explanations, as Derwin and Zevin said. Teachers have a special obligation to investigate with students on how society have shaped the stories of people's lives and to envision more inclusive, complex studies. At the end, developing an analytical and divergent thinking in social studies stresses the need of a connected development that make learners understand the interdisciplinary concepts of social studies, as Lipstick said. Inductive and problem-solving methods must be emphasized as effective methods in critical social studies education. Develop instructional methods that involve learners in social studies. Thank you for watching.